It's good to see you again.
Hello. Yeah, here we go. Figuring it out as we go at Coalition Purple. Yeah, it's a crazy time. I think I was saying like last week, December's used to be kind of an easy, slower time for me, but man, I don't know what's happened the last couple of years. And that sounds like I can't wait for the first of the year now. It's like I want things to slow down. Anyways, what about your way?
Well, no, for me, yeah, the holiday time, everything does kind of slow down. I think because of a lot of what I'm involved in is property management. Nobody
Right.
wants to complain about anything during the holidays. They're all busy. They've all got things to do. So customer service is a little easier.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, I hear you. So, what else is going on in the political world?
Well, we were talking about this just a second ago and talking about the winds here blowing in California again, which of course means that they turned all the power off. And this
Did you
particular
get your
time,
power turned off? Did you get your
I
power?
didn't, but my mother did. So my mother
Really?
is in her mid 80s. And she's in good health and everything, which is great. And she does have a little backup generator, which she uses when they turn the power off. But the thing is, talking to her this time, one of the things that happened was when they turned off the power, it turned off all the cell phone towers in the area that she was. So not only
Wow.
did she not have any power, she didn't have the ability to use her cell phone, and which meant she couldn't call out if something had gone wrong. Now, fortunately, the fire was far enough away from her that nothing did happen. But that to me is like, that is crazy nuts. Just crazy. And I wanted to sort of add a little bit to that because there's been a few things that we've sort of been that are sort of happening and filtering around in California. The first one is that Gavin Newsom is preparing $25 million war chest to fight against Donald Trump's whatever it is that he has in his head that Donald Trump is going to do. And it's like if we've got 25 million bucks to start immediately suing somebody who hasn't even taken office yet, then maybe we could fix the power lines so that the power doesn't go out when the wind blows. And then there was the 24 billion with a B that we have spent on homelessness, only to see homelessness in California increase in the past five
Yep.
years. And so it's like instead of having programs that don't work, maybe we could fix the power lines so that you don't have to turn everyone's power off when the wind blows in California. Something to think about. And it's just like one of these things where, as I say, it sort of comes back to politics. When you have a state like California and you have one party that just automatically gets to be the office holders for everything, and they're never challenged, they never have to worry about winning or losing. They think all their policies are fine. I mean, what the elections in California told all the Democrat politicians here is that they're doing exactly the right thing. They all got reelected, so they must be doing the right thing.
Right.
Their way of gauging the success and failure of a project. So, like the $24 billion that they spent on homelessness over the past 5 years, that achieved its exact intended goal, which was getting them all reelected. And so, until the people of California start sending the politicians a message that we're not just going to automatically reelect them every year, they're going to keep doing the exact same stupid things, and we're going to keep having our power turned off when the wind blows.
Wow. So, is your mom? She's close to that Malibu fire that was going
Yeah,
on and all that.
yeah.
Yeah, that
She's
was
up near
great.
the Ventura County line, so she
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
that close to it, but close enough that they turned her power off.
Right. No, that's crazy, man. That's a crazy fire, but and we've had that happen down here in Southern California as well. So
Yeah,
it's crazy. Um, but but to your point, I I don't know. Again, how do you convince people to just stop the madness? Because the and I totally agree on the homeless thing in particular. California is definitely the poster child of what not to do.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I mean, it's crazy.
and it's sad because here in San Diego, and we've talked about this a bunch of times in the past. It continues to get kind of worse and worse. They've it's kind of like moderated and sort of stagnated a bit, but it's not really gotten any better.
Yeah,
And they they keep trying the same old things, and it comes back to incentives. And how do you build the incentives in um, for the politicians as well as the organizations, and I'm not trying to defame any particular organizations, but defame them or incent them rather to actually solve the problem,
Right.
because homelessness is just another social issue that has created another industry.
Yeah.
It's
And that's the
actually
thing.
it's an industry.
It really is. It absolutely 100% is. And the problem is that there are too many people giving, I would say, giving money and giving political support to organizations that sort of create these sort of insular industries around them. I mean, one thing that you could also say is that, things like race are an industry now. Everybody's got their own race category and group, and all those groups have social groups that are targeting to get them to vote, get their votes, provide them with various things here and there. And it doesn't matter. It's all across the board. It's all the races that do it. But it's like it becomes a factory. There's an onus upon each one of those groups to deliver something based on race. And then, you get a very divided country and very divided states. And we're seeing more and more of it because it can be so lucrative
Yeah,
to, break one small group off and then say, gimme, gimme, gimme. And it's not, it could be based around almost anything, like if it's homelessness, you can make money for that. If it's race, you can make money for that. But also if it's like big industry, you can make money for that too. It's like,
absolutely.
we represent this industry, like for my entire life, everyone's talked about the oil and gas industries and how, they have certain politicians in their pockets to do certain things. The credit card industries. Why is it that your credit card has a 25 to 30% interest rate on it?
Right.
Because there's a group of politicians that are specifically dedicated to, catering to credit card companies. And so it's like there has to be a way to get sort of a broader movement of people where you're not just breaking up everyone into little compartments and setting them against each other, but saying, hey, look, we have this wide swath of big problems that affects absolutely everybody. We need a party that represents that wide swath of people to fix these big problems.
Yep.
And again, in California, we just don't have anything even remotely approaching that.
Yeah. Well, and it's across the board. I was reading an article. I'll try and remember to put it in the link. I'll link into the show notes, but uh, where actually the GOP, although I'm sure the Democrats are just kind of privately cheering them on, is pushing for the Supreme Court to take Citizens United down to the next level. And I'd forgotten a little bit about Citizens United, but it's really around allowing corporations in particular to
Yeah.
have, unlimited influence in terms of how much money they pay into political campaigns. But that's a problem for individual candidates, or at least that's their claim. So, like the Republican National Committee, there's some limit of like $350,000 you can donate to or contribute to the national party, but you can only contribute like $5,000 to an individual candidate.
Mhm.
Well, their position is, hey, we shouldn't be, we shouldn't have limits for individual candidates. If it's okay to get $350,000 as the party, every candidate should also be able to get $350,000. So that just opens it up. I mean, if that happens, it's like even more opportunity to have more politicians in the pockets for whatever little individual effort there is going on.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
just like it all comes down to these incentives and how these campaigns are financed. And it's just like a campaign never ends. It's like
yeah.
campaign season just never ends. And that's where the only power we have as people is to branch off from both of these big behemoths and start something new that's not, and don't support candidates and don't support parties that are doing this because it's become so lucrative
Yeah.
and so lucrative for all these ancillary groups that make money off of it,
Yep.
frankly.
Yep. Well, first of all, there's always something that I always have to say about United anytime it gets brought up. So the Citizens United case created something. It's like it's got a number. It's like a 50 501c3 or
Right.
4, something like that. I can't remember
Right.
exactly what the designation is, but it was like number 4 on the list of these charitable organizations. So before corporations got the ability to give unlimited amounts of money, unions had that already because they
Right.
were a 501c
Yeah.
something lower. So
Yeah.
if the union that's organizing the labor within your company and the heads of that union can make the decisions to give an unlimited amount of money to people, then the problem is, and then you say that the CEO of the company can't, then it's like, what are you doing? Because like
Right.
a giant union, you think about like the AFL-CIO or the
Sure.
teachers union in California, for instance. The head of the teachers union is essentially the CIO CEO of a corporation, right?
Right.
They're the head
Yep.
of a gigantic union that has an enormous number of people involved in and takes an enormous amount of money. And so the head of the union is the CEO of a company. So that CEO of a company can give unlimited amounts of money, but the CEO of, say, Google can't.
Right.
Well, that's what Citizen United was about.
Yeah.
It's like you can't have one or the other. So you can either have everybody giving unlimited amounts of money, or you can take that right away from everybody. But it can't be this person can do it and that person can't.
Oh yeah. No, I actually saw the reason why they voted the way they did to because there was a disparity there.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but the only way to fix that disparity is to make it even for everybody, but lower it so it doesn't become so influential.
Yeah.
Or to your point, like, I think more and more about your kind of example of it too is you either lower how much people can contribute or you just simply max out how much any individual campaign can spend.
Yeah.
And
Because
but one of the tricky parts of that is with Citizens United too. One of the reasons why that all got started was they complained that Fahrenheit 450, whatever that Michael Moore documentary was, Fahrenheit
Mhm.
451 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
What's it, 911? Fahrenheit 911? I don't remember the name
I
of
can't
it.
remember. Yeah.
But it was Fahrenheit something. And they claimed that that was political speech
Hmm.
because it was pretty anti, I think it was Bush or whatever he was focused on. I think it
Yeah.
was Bush. And, um, and so their point was, well, that's political speech. So they turned around and tried to do a documentary about whoever the Democrat was at that point. And they basically were, and they said Michael Moore's thing was freedom of speech. You can't mess with that. But when they tried to do a similar thing, they basically ruled against them. You can't do that because that is political speech because you're a political party. You're not a filmmaker.
Right.
So it's like, okay.
Yeah. How do you draw the
So
line?
everybody either has freedom of speech or they don't, one way or the other, right?
Yeah.
And but then it still comes back to the limits. It's like, okay, but how much is too much, or how much of the incentive is basically hurting the process because politicians are, profiting from all this.
Yeah. I one thing that I think is sort of interesting, and until this last election, I never really thought it would be possible for this to be true. But I get the feeling that there may actually be sort of a natural self-limiting, um, how do I want to put this, process in campaigns, because the Harris campaign spent close to $2 billion, I think,
Yeah.
I want to say,
Yeah.
and they lost. And a lot of people were pretty angry about the fact that they had put $2 billion into a
Right.
losing campaign. Not to mention that you would put $2 billion into any campaign. So now that that's happened, maybe things will find like a sort of like a maximum level where it's just like beyond any certain point. It's just like ridiculous to keep spending money beyond that. I mean, I don't have a huge amount of hope in that idea, but I mean, it could be something that's interesting.
Well, it's definitely they're all looking at
Yeah.
because I've heard a couple, everybody's got their theory as to why she lost. But one of the ones that I think it was the Wisconsin Democratic poobah who runs the organization there was basically saying, there's people have just tuned out campaigns basically
Yeah.
for the most part. So just pouring more money into running more ads and things like that, it's almost meaningless.
Yeah.
And so to your point, maybe we finally reached that threshold where everybody's just kind of given up in terms of all that.
Yeah.
But, and the other part of it is too, and this was true of when Trump was first elected, the first time he won, uh, and this time he spent a fraction of the money.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And the only reason, and he, again, I can't, I totally dislike the guy, but at the same time, you have to respect the fact that he, whether you agree with his messaging or not, his messaging resonated. And he
Yeah.
didn't have to spend the money.
Right.
Now, time will tell, how much of his messaging is really true, and we all we all have our suspicions, but it doesn't matter, it
Well, I think
worked.
I was going to say another interesting thing that I think could come out of this election is sort of the idea of what constitutes like in-kind contributions.
Yep.
So one of the things that's come out pretty recently was that the Harris campaign paid Oprah Winfrey's production company, Harpo Inc., $1 million. And then they went on and had an interview. So what was purportedly an interview was actually a paid for campaign
Right.
stop.
Yep.
So that's sort of an interesting thing to think about. Does that have to be revealed at the time that it's happening? And then another thing that I thought was really interesting, and again, I don't have any idea how this would play out. And so it's sort of like a hypothetical. So let's say that somewhere along the line you determine that all the legal cases that were brought against Donald Trump were political. I mean,
Right.
whether or not that happens or not,
Right.
remains to be seen. But let's, for the sake of argument, say that that's what you found out. They spent millions and millions of dollars on those prosecutions, and then they received hundreds of millions of dollars of coverage. Whether that helped or hurt Trump, again, don't know.
Right.
But if all those things are inherently political, then they're all essentially a campaign contribution, all of which would be unreported and therefore illegal. So I mean,
Yep.
it's like this crazy idea when you start looking at everything that's done for political purpose, in a sense, is a campaign contribution. And you have the campaign spending billions of dollars, but that's actually dwarfed by all the different, things that go on in a campaign. Like, seriously, how much value was Donald Trump's Joe Rogan interview worth? I mean, what was that worth to Donald Trump's campaign? A
Right.
billion dollars all by itself?
Yeah.
Had 100 million people looked at it? I
Right.
mean, my God, the value
Yeah.
of that is almost incalculable.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. And that that's where I think it comes back to the metrics are all screwed up,
Mhm.
and I think we've talked about this before. And I always forget the country it is. It's somewhere, I think, in Indonesia, where the whole government is really measured on the happiness of their citizens. Or maybe
Mhm.
it's the Netherlands or something,
Yeah,
and some other country, and the whole goal is they measure the happiness of their citizens, and that's really what drives the government. And it's like, I don't know if that would ever work here because we're all kind of independent, cynical jerks at times. But
yeah,
at the same time, the idea of it is not a bad one. It's like that's what we have to get to, right? Kind of come back to the fire thing. It's like, hey, if you really want to get elected and you need to be on the right side of people's happiness factor, that hey, I can use my phone even if there's a fire going on,
yeah,
that kind of stuff. Because at the end, and I think that is what came out of this last election is whether people feel the country's going in the right direction or not, it doesn't really matter. It's the perception that matters.
yeah,
Things could be going great by all the numbers, but if people aren't feeling that way, guess what? They're going to look for a change. And that's
yeah,
the more and more that comes out, it sounds like that's really kind of where people were. It wasn't like they were like big rah rah for Trump. It was just like, for whatever reason, we're not feeling like things are going the right way. So we just want to change. Or we're not going to show up to vote, which is probably more the case. A lot of people
yeah.
just didn't show up to vote.
Well, one of the things that's sort of interesting about that whole idea is that, human psychology is sort of an interesting thing. We're, in the end of the day, we're all humans. We all have a similar brain. We all have, similar human genetics. We all, in large respects, react to things very similar. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of individual differences in things, but when you start really looking at like a range of races or economic strata or whatever, I mean, people of all races can be happy. People of all
Yeah,
races can be sad or depressed. People of all races can be peaceful. People of all races can be violent. People of all races can be, understanding. They can all be bigoted. Rich people are not universally happy. Poor people are not universally sad. And so it's like human beings react to things in the ways that they can. And
right.
everybody's experience, for all the myriad things that affect how we view the world, they're all very individual. But at the end of the day, it's all about, essentially, it's all about neural processing. You look at your circumstances, however diverse or strange they may be, and you personally make a decision: am I happy about this or not?
Right.
And then, we all human action, I think, is basically based on those individual thoughts and feelings. I think doing this is a good idea. I think doing that is a bad idea. And then, everybody makes these kind of individual decisions. And so it's like it's very hard to then look sort of at a macro level of like government, and it's like, well, what did this policy actually do to make me feel better or worse?
Yep.
And so it's like it becomes very complicated when you start looking at the overall big picture of things, and like what people think about politics. And I go back to the thing where it's like people hate Congress, but they think that their individual congressperson is a decent person.
Right.
And it's like that's like consistently true forever, and you can never get past it. It's like because you have this sort of individual experience with whoever your person is and what you
Right.
think of them, what you
Familiarity.
think about them, and then the sort of bigger picture about what's actually going on, and then you sort of make decisions based on those feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's weird, how that whole idea, kind of taking it from the abstract to the practical, really hit me recently was when this shooter went and basically assassinated that
Oh, that was
healthcare
nuts.
CEO, which was just awful. But there was not an outpouring of sympathy really for the guy that got killed. I mean, I mean, some of the things that I've seen and read where people were saying, you know, he deserved it kind of thing was basically
Yeah,
the bottom line because they are so frustrated with the healthcare system. And not to say that a lot of these kind of people, individuals, don't have a part in making it complicated and difficult and expensive and all that.
yeah.
He doesn't deserve to die for it. But that's where people's mindsets are at. It's like, you know, it, this is part, these are the kind of people that are part of the problem in the healthcare world. It's like, well, maybe they are, but that's just a really sick way of thinking you're kind of sending a message that this needs to be fixed. But
Well,
that's where we're at on
yeah,
so many things.
and things like that too. I think in a way are a great example of the futile expenditure of energy, so to speak. I mean, yeah, he killed that guy, but did it change the healthcare system at all?
No,
Some other person is just going to step in and do exactly the same
right,
thing. Because again, it's like there's so many forces that act on the healthcare system, and like why does something cost what it does, or how are things interacted? It's like killing somebody, even if they're at the head of one of the biggest insurers in the world. I mean, it's not going to do anything. So I mean, it's just futile cruelty.
well, but what concerns me about it too is it does set a precedent in terms of, because obviously the guy that did it is not of right mind. I mean,
Yeah.
everything that's kind of coming, he sounded like he had every opportunity and advantage in his life, but for whatever reason, there was something that didn't quite click for him to get to that point. But what scares me about it is there's a lot of people out there like him.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
if they start seeing this as some way to send a message or thinking it's some solution to whatever the issue is, that's not a good place for a country to be. And again, it comes back to how do you incent not only the politicians, but I guess all of us as citizens that how do we figure out how to come together, because and act as one set of decent human beings. The only time it seems to happen is when there's a huge crisis. When 9/11 happened, right? We all kind of rallied together. Everybody kind of laid down their arms, and we all got a rally for the country and all that kind of stuff. We have those examples, but it lasts a month or two at best. And
Yeah.
so the days of, and I don't know if we ever had any days for very long where we kind of rallied as a country. Um, but that really should be the incentive. And again, going back to third parties, that's where we got to get to. It's like this is the only way we can force the issue, because the other forces are so strong and so incentivized to not change
Yeah.
that the only power we have is to break off and stop supporting them and trying to find out, a different path.
Yeah. But that's also the thing about like the multi-party system and why I'm so in favor of multiple parties is that we usually talk about it in terms of a third party, but I think a fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth party in different
Absolutely.
places would also be useful. Because it's like if you just ask the question, well, how do we fix the healthcare system? Well, that's a pretty tough question.
Yes.
You're probably not going to get the same answer for a lot of people.
Nope.
And I think the only way you could ever actually find a pathway to fixing the healthcare system would be to have multiple states take up multiple initiatives and start coalescing the ones that work. But to do that, you have to have a diversity of thought and and to express that diversity of thought, a diversity of parties that are actually willing to try things to try and make things work better.
Yeah.
And as I say, and I don't think you want to do it at a federal level because then you get the one size fits all. I mean, if you hit it just right, you got the magic bullet, somehow somebody figures out the exact right thing to do at the exact right time. Okay, magically the federal government gets it right. But otherwise, you end up getting it wrong. You just make everything worse. And I actually think that Obamacare is kind of an example of that. There were some things in Obamacare that were right, but there were way too many things in it that were wrong. And what it did result in was just vastly increasing cost of living,
Yeah. Well,
including healthcare costs.
yeah.
And so it's like, do it statewide, have some ideas, find some things that work, but you need new parties and new leadership. We can't keep electing, and it goes back to the beginning. We can't keep electing the same people because all you're doing when you elect the same people is telling them that they're doing everything right. So it's like
Right.
we in California think that the healthcare system in California is garbage. So what do? All the people that could influence that healthcare system, we put back into office so they can sit there and think, boy, our healthcare system must be great because everybody who's concerned about healthcare just voted me back into office.
Right.
So it's like obviously things will never get done. We need more diversity of thought, more better ideas, more people trying more things so that we could try and find a solution that actually works for the most people.
Yeah. And again, in most cases, particularly at the local level, but and state level, you really don't need that many people to branch off and have enough leverage to force some of these issues of more diversity of thought and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because so many elections are determined by a relatively few votes, and that's why I am continuing to be optimistic about it. Only in that if we can get just enough people to see that vision of, hey, listen, it takes relatively few of us to break off,
Yeah.
and as long as we're coalescing to influence a lot of these elections.
Yeah.
And it's not an overwhelming. It should be an overwhelming task.
Yeah, as I say, it's one of those things where, you're always looking for that one spark. Something
Yeah,
that just sort of goes off in people's heads like, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with this one party nonsense. Let's do something different. Let's make something better. And if people can sort of get on board with that idea, and that's kind of part of the reason I'm doing this podcast and enjoying it is just trying to get the idea out there. Look, it is possible. And there are a lot of us out here, and it's just like keep pushing the ideas and that there is going to have to be something for people I think to coalesce around, but it could come
we
from
do.
almost anywhere. And so it's like if you're ready for a new idea, then when the new idea comes along, a lot of people can grab onto it. And as I say, I hope our podcast can be part of that. And as
Yep.
I say, but hopefully more people in more places start to get the idea that, things do need to change. We do need to have more diversity of thought so that we can get some good ideas out there to start fixing some of these things.
Yeah. Well, and we can't say it enough. People need to deregister.
Yes, deregister for
Number
sure.
one, just that's the first step, just deregister. And if you add up all the people who are never Trumpers and you add
Mhm.
up all the people who are just like totally disillusioned by the Democratic Party, you got a whole bunch of people.
Yeah,
and and if each one of them can just relax a bit and say, hey, whatever, I voted for Trump because I just couldn't vote for Kamala, or vice versa.
right.
That's that's all the more the reason you need to just deregister, become an independent, and yeah, with that way we can get enough people to start working around. Because I agree, we have to coalesce around some specific, and there's things going on out there.
Yeah.
Um, Parties that are trying to come together, and I do think there needs to be a coalition of coalitions in terms of get the Forward Party and the No Labels Party and anybody that's trying to work towards the center and work to get them together and work together
Yeah.
to create it, because we got more than enough people to do it. It's
Yeah.
just
It
we got
would
to
be
coalesce around it.
It'd be really great if there were somebody who would be willing to run for governor next time around in California as an independent.
Yeah.
Because first of all, running as a Republican is a dead end anyway, so I don't know
Right.
why you want to run as a Republican. And you basically know who you're going to get from the Democrats. It's going to be one of the crew that's just circulating around and holding some kind of office somewhere anyway. So why not just run as an independent and just say, look, enough of this. Let's make something in California that really works. Let's really like have a group and a candidate that really just wants to go after, the issues that, we're failing on so badly. And as I say, back to the very beginning of things we were saying, like infrastructure. Everybody
Yeah.
always talks about infrastructure. We're going to do infrastructure. We're going to do infrastructure. And then the wind blows and they turn everybody's power off. And so it's like, let's just at least elect somebody. At least elect somebody who can keep the power on. That should be their slogan for the race. I'm going to keep the
Keep the
power on.
power on. Yeah. There you go. No, I know, because I mean it's happening all over there. Depending on the day of the week, it could happen anywhere in California. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's just awful. It really
And
is.
it's like, how can anyone be against that campaign promise? I'm going to keep the power on, right? It's like saying, yeah, I'm
Keep the
against
power
the
on.
cure for
Yeah.
cancer, right? It's
Yeah.
like, come on, everybody can get around that.
Yeah. Talk about an attainable goal. That's all I'm doing. I'm just going to keep the power on.
Well, yep, yeah, there you go. Well, we'll put the word out there. So all you people that are planning to run for governor someday, there you go. That's free
Yeah. For
political advice
it's right there.
right there. Keep the power on, man. All right. Well, we better wrap this up,
That,
and
that was good.
we'll let's see. I guess yeah, we still got another week before we can still probably do something before Christmas week yet too. So
Yeah.
talk next week.
Sounds good. See you then.